after the Gulf War ceasefire, the Discovery Channel is proud to present the following special presentation.
It was quite clear that we were reaching a moment of climax as a result of the Iraqi buildup.
What was brought home by Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait was that he did not have to take Saudi Arabia in order to dominate the Gulf.
We wanted to make certain that the Iraqis knew eyeball to eyeball from us that we were serious. We were deadly serious.
The President's message was very clear, and that's if asked to defend Saudi Arabia, we would.
August 1990, the Iraqi forces of Saddam Hussein invade Kuwait. By January, America enters a war in the Middle East. 1 year later, the key players in Operation Desert Storm are gathered for the first time, brought together by former Assistant Secretary of Defense Richard Pearl. Now resident fellow for the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C., Pearl conducted exclusive interviews with the Gulf War's top command and organized the Institute's panel discussions of the conflict and its aftermath. Policymakers and military leaders offer a day-by-day account. The futile negotiations, the tense preparations for combat, and the battles in the air and on the ground. The Gulf Crisis, the road to war. On the final episode, the fighting begins. Bombs fall on Baghdad, Scuds fly toward Israel, and negotiators struggle for an early end to the conflict. On this episode, our American Enterprise Institute panel is led by Charles Wheeler.
Gentlemen, let me take you back to the 9th of January 1991, when three of you here, Mr. Kimmett, Mr. Ross and Mr. Kelly, went to Geneva with Secretary of State Baker to meet the Iraqi Foreign Minister, Tariq Aziz. Mr. Kimmett, when the cameras were ushered out and the doors closed, what happened?
Secretary Baker began the meeting. He wanted first to hand to Tariq Aziz a letter from President Bush to Saddam Hussein. The letter was in a sealed envelope, but on the outside of it was a copy. And Tariq Aziz took it, asked if he could have a moment to read it.
It took him a long time. He took maybe 12 to 15 minutes. He read the letter, didn't say a word, and then he looked at me and he said, "I cannot accept this letter." And I said, "Really, why not?" He said, "Because it is not written in the language that heads of state use to communicate with each other."
I wrote in my notebook that his hand trembled slightly as he read the letter, and I noticed small beads of perspiration on his temples. He had Saddam Hussein's half-brother sitting on his right.
On the other side was Saddam's interpreter. Tariq Aziz speaks excellent English, but spoke in Arabic throughout. I'm not sure whether that was for precision, for the record, or because he had his handlers on both sides.
Some said that you had to tell it face-to-face to Saddam Hussein, that he didn't take bad news from messengers, and therefore none of his people were willing to give him bad news. And he said, "You can publish it in your media." And he put it back on the table. And I said, "Well, thank you very much, Minister, but it seems to me that you have taken upon yourself an extraordinary responsibility. Since you are the only one on your side of the table who has read the letter, and we may not publish it in our media."
So he sweated when he read it. Was that the purpose?
The purpose of the letter was to basically give the Iraqis the unvarnished position of the United States, not through CNN, not through Joe, not even in this sense, through the Secretary of State, but from the President of the United States. So in the 1% chance, or 1/10 of 1% chance, that they might have any doubt about what the President of the United States was saying, this would be eliminated.
We were very explicit and frank. And I remember saying to him, "Don't think that you're going to set the terms of this engagement as you might have done in the Iraq-Iran war. We will be setting the terms of this engagement, and you have no idea of the scope and magnitude of the technology.
Tariq Aziz, I suppose you could say, disputed that indirectly by saying that they in Iraq understood very well what war was like because of their 8 years of experience, that the United States did not know how to fight in the desert, that we did not know the desert, we hadn't ridden across it by horse or by camel.
He made long arguments about the peace process, about the unfairness of the plight of the Palestinians, and I said what we were saying publicly at that time, which is that we didn't think for 1 minute that Iraq invaded Kuwait to help the Palestinians.
And I recall the Secretary repeatedly saying, I haven't heard one thing new from you. All you do is repeat what we've heard for a long time.
Mr. Kelly, what happened to that letter?
As we began to stand up, Secretary Baker said to Tariq Aziz, "Are you sure you wouldn't like to take this letter with you?" And Tariq said something like,
he said, I'm sure.
"I'm sure." And at that point, I guess Mr. Baker picked up the letter and took it home. But it had lain on the table, unspoken of, for 6 or 7 hours, but very much there, and everyone was aware of it.
He gave me the impression of a man who thought that fate had sort of decreed that this was the way it was going to be, and that if they were going to have to take this punishment, that so be it. That's what was going to happen.
The morning of the meeting in Geneva, we met with the president over in the Oval Office, and then went back to a small office he has off the Oval Office, a very private office, where he and I think the Vice President, perhaps General Scowcroft, sat and watched the CNN coverage of the meeting between Baker and Tariq Aziz.
Secretary Baker and Iraqi Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz emerged from the meeting room with their aides.
Jim came out at one point and called in and in effect said things were not going well. Then as the meeting broke up, they went down to hold a press conference. All of this live on worldwide television.
Regrettably, ladies and gentlemen, I heard nothing today that, in over 6 hours, I heard nothing that suggested to me any Iraqi flexibility whatsoever on complying with the United Nations Security Council resolutions.
You could tell by the look on Jim's face that the talks had not gone well, that there had been an absolute stone wall from the Iraqis.
When it comes to Israel, you are calm, you are not worried, but when it comes to the Arabs, there you raise the stick.
Aziz was in another world. He simply had no understanding of what was about to happen. And it was at that point that I knew that any hope of resolving this peacefully had probably just gone down the drain.
When we return to the Gulf crisis, the road to war, the threat of chemical warfare hits Israel.